I sacrificed 4K a month for my grandchild's school, only to discover my son was spending it on luxury for his wife. Every month, my pension provided me with $5,600, and out of that, $4,000 was automatically sent to my son, Jason, to ensure my grandson, Tyler, had a secure future. However, it wasn't until one afternoon, when I bumped into Shirley, my son's mother-in-law, at the store, that I learned the truth. My hard-earned money wasn't being used for Tyler's education, as I had believed. Instead, it was simply pocket money for Jason and Amanda to lavish themselves with luxury goods. Just last month, Jason had even bought Shirley a brand new Louis Vuitton handbag, but what truly hurt was the realization that while they were indulging themselves, Tyler was often left alone after school, waiting for someone to pick him up. That was the moment I understood that I had been living a lie all these years, and when I finally decided to take back what I had been giving them, their response came swiftly. Did they really think I was that easily deceived? The autumn sunlight filtered through the windows, casting golden patterns across the living room floor. The light was warm, but it couldn't thaw the coldness that had settled in my heart. My name is Helen Brooks. I'm 68 years old, and I spent my career as a middle school teacher in San Francisco before retiring. My husband passed away young, leaving me to raise our son Jason on my own. Now, Jason has his own family. He's married to Amanda, and they have a son, Tyler. The four of us have been crammed into the old house my husband and I bought many years ago. To an outsider, it may sound like a cozy home filled with 3 generations, but the reality was far different. I spent decades teaching and guiding others. I wouldn't claim to have had a global impact, but I always took pride in knowing I did my best. After I retired, my pension allowed me to live modestly but comfortably in this expensive Bay Area city. I watched Jason work long hours as an engineer, while Amanda had decided to stay at home, supposedly to care for Tyler. My heart ached for them, understanding the struggles of young families these days with daycare costs, after-school activities, and the constant demands of everyday life. So, I decided to help. From the moment Tyler was born, I pledged to contribute $4,000 each month from my pension to support them. At first, Amanda pretended to turn down my offer, but over time, it became routine. Each time I handed her an envelope filled with cash, she would smile warmly and say, "Helen, you really should treat yourself more. Stop worrying about us." Her smile was sweet, but her eyes never truly met mine with warmth. They always felt shallow, like sunlight glinting off the surface of water, too distant to reach the heart. Life is undeniably tough for young families today. Daycare, after-school activities, the endless stream of expenses. I wanted to help. From the day Tyler was born, I pledged $4,000 from my pension every month. For Tyler's education and well-being, I'd said. At first, Amanda feigned reluctance, a polite refusal, but soon enough, my contribution became an accepted, then expected routine. Every month, when I handed her the envelope of cash, she'd beam. "Helen, you really should treat yourself more. Stop worrying about us so much," she'd coo. Her smile was honey-sweet, but her eyes were shallow, like sunlight on ice, reflecting light but offering no warmth, never truly reaching her heart or mine. Gradually, I saw it more clearly. Amanda was never overtly rude. Polite, yes. Attentive in public, absolutely. She'd serve me food at dinner, boast to neighbors about her wonderfully thoughtful mother-in-law. But it was all a performance, a perfect porcelain glaze, shiny, flawless, yet utterly fragile. One careless tap, and it felt like the whole façade would shatter. She never asked about my health, not really. Never engaged in conversations that mattered. Even if I was visibly unwell or down, she'd offer a perfunctory word or two, then glide away. A sheet of invisible, impenetrable glass stood between us. I wasn't blind to the chasm. My balcony orchid, with just a little care, bloomed faithfully each spring, offering its delicate fragrance in return. Yet, all my love, my sacrifices for this family, yielded only those cold, calculated performances. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit by the window, staring at the distant city lights, a heavy, damp sadness pressing against my chest. "You're overthinking it, Helen," I'd chide myself. "Young people have their own lives," I'd reason. "As long as Jason is coping, as long as Tyler is happy and healthy, what does a little loneliness matter? Blood doesn't automatically equate to love." I reminded myself of that bitter truth often. No matter how much I gave, it seemed it would never be enough to forge genuine closeness. And so, I swallowed the hurt, the helplessness, the sighs, choking them down until they became a familiar ache within me. The days passed, colorless and slow. My world revolved around Tyler. He was a bright, lively boy, the absolute apple of my eye. Ever since he started preschool, I handled all the pickups and drop-offs. Amanda claimed to be overwhelmed with housework. Jason was drowning in work, they said. Household chores too much for them to manage. Fine. Picking Tyler up every day, watching him race towards me, his tiny backpack bouncing, as he threw himself into my arms calling, "Grandma!" in that sweet, high-pitched voice. That joy, that hug, made everything seem worthwhile. Every afternoon at 3, rain or shine, I was at that school gate. And when Tyler hugged my legs, his laughter echoing, every frustration, every silent worry would momentarily melt away. His tuition, after-school classes, clothes, toys, I paid for almost all of it. Amanda, meanwhile, would sigh dramatically, painting a perpetual picture of their dire financial straits. "Mom," she'd say, a frown etched on her face, "Tyler's piano fees are due, and his art teacher mentioned he needs new paints." Without hesitation, I'd pull out my checkbook. "Don't you worry, Amanda," I'd reply. "We can't cut corners on his education. If you need more, just ask." My sole focus was giving Tyler the best possible start, the brightest future. I truly felt for Jason. Shouldering an entire family's burdens, as he seemed to be, was no easy task, and my heart ached for Tyler. I desperately hoped he could soar higher than any of us ever had. Taking care of them became my purpose, my quiet pride. Of course, seeing Amanda parade new clothes or expensive cosmetics, bought with the money I provided, stung, but I'd reason it away. If pampering herself makes her happy, I'd tell myself, perhaps the whole household will be a bit more cheerful. A grandparent's love is, by nature, giving. But when that giving is twisted into an entitlement, an expectation, it sours. I often found myself thinking this with a bitter, internal smile, bracing for the next request. I clung to the belief that as long as I kept giving, kept sacrificing, I could hold this fractured family together, shield Tyler with my love. I couldn't have been more profoundly wrong. The illusion shattered one ordinary Saturday. The sun was bright, and I'd decided to visit the mall to buy Tyler new spring shoes. The place buzzed with life, chatter, and color. I was browsing the children's shoe section when a sharp, gratingly familiar voice pierced the din, half laughing, half boasting. I turned. There, holding court in a nearby lounge area, was Shirley Davis, Amanda's mother. She was extravagantly dressed, a heavy gold necklace glittering at her throat, a stark, vulgar contrast to my simple attire. Oblivious to my presence, she prattled on, her voice carrying with horrifying clarity. "Lily, you simply won't believe it. My Amanda, she's hit the jackpot. Her mother-in-law is an absolute fool. So set in her ways, an easy mark. Hands over $4,000 every single month. Says it's for the kids' schooling. Ha! Who even buys that?" Each word was a shard of ice, piercing me, freezing me to the spot. And that 4,000? Oh, they blow it however they please. "Last month, Jason bought me this Louis Vuitton purse," she preened, patting a glossy bag. "This month, Amanda's eyeing a mink vest. I told her, 'Girl, you've got to enjoy yourself. What's the old biddy going to do? Take it to her grave?'" Shirley erupted in loud, crude laughter, a sound so full of scorn it felt like knives twisting in my chest. An LV purse, a mink vest, my $4,000, Tyler's future, just disposable income for them to flaunt. All this time, I'd scrimped and saved, agonized over every dollar, believing I was investing in Tyler's future. And to them? I was nothing but a gullible, walking ATM. My ears roared, my head spun. Shame, incandescent rage, and a shattering heartbreak coiled inside me like venomous snakes, squeezing the very breath from my lungs. I stumbled backward, a tiny child's shoe clutched in my hand, the only thing grounding me. So that's what I was to them, an easy mark, a fool. The realization was a jagged blade, carving me apart from the inside. I don't remember how I got out of the mall. My legs felt like lead. The world was blindingly bright, yet unbearably cold. Shirley's garish red lips and triumphant, sneering grin were seared into my mind. Her cruel words echoed, over and over, each repetition a fresh, merciless wound. Back home, I locked the door and collapsed into my armchair, too numb to move for what felt like hours. Years of devotion, repaid with such callous betrayal and mockery. The face in the mirror seemed older, the lines etched by time deeper, sharper tonight. I'd lived my life with integrity, teaching honesty, never intentionally wronging a soul. Yet, in the end, it was my own family, the people I loved most, who had turned me into a laughingstock. No, I wouldn't let it end like this. As the initial shock subsided, a cold resolve settled in. I had to stay rational. I needed the full truth, and I needed irrefutable proof. From that moment on, I pretended nothing had happened. I cooked, I cleaned, I maintained that gentle, perhaps slightly vacant smile. But inside, I was forging steel, building a fortress. My eyes sharpened, no longer soft but cold, watchful, like a hawk circling its unsuspecting prey. I began to observe Amanda with meticulous care. And yes, lately, she was constantly glued to her phone, a sly smirk playing on her lips. Delivery boxes from high-end stores began to pile up at the front door, one after another. My heart hammered against my ribs as I scanned the thinning crowd, desperately searching for Tyler. Then I saw him, standing alone at the edge of the gate, his little blue backpack seeming to swallow his small frame. He looked so fragile, so lost amidst the diminishing chaos. Parents arrived, scooped up their children with smiles and hugs, and gradually, the crowd dispersed. Tyler remained, craning his neck, peering around, his small face etched with an expression of such disappointment and helplessness it tore at me. A giant hand clenched around my heart, squeezing until it ached physically. But I forced myself to stay hidden. I had to know. Would anyone come? 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. Tyler was the only child left. The school security guard, a kind-faced man I recognized, approached him and spoke gently. Tyler shook his head, then squared his little shoulders, slung his backpack on, and began to walk. Home, all by himself. His small feet dragged along the sidewalk. My heart leaped into my throat, choking me. He wasn't even 7 years old. Tiny, vulnerable, navigating busy streets teeming with cars and strangers. The potential dangers. They were unthinkable. I couldn't bear it another second. I hurried after him. "Tyler!" I called out, my voice louder than I intended. He turned and his eyes lit up when he saw me. But just as quickly, the light faded, his smile faltered, and he lowered his head. His voice wobbled, laced with a child's innocent hurt. "Grandma? What took you so long?" I knelt, ruffling his hair, my heart shattering into a million pieces. "Oh, sweetheart, I am so sorry." "I got held up, sweetie," I improvised. "Didn't your mum tell you she was picking you up today?" Tyler tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. Then, in that sweet, innocent voice that always melted me, he said, "Mommy said she had to go get pretty. She told me to be careful. She said you gave her money for beauty treatments, Grandma, so she can get prettier and then make lots of money." Beauty treatments, facials. To make lots of money. I froze, the words hitting me like blows. My hard-earned money, Tyler's future, wasn't just for luxury handbags. It was for Amanda's daily salon visits. And worse, infinitely worse, she was feeding this poison to her own child, twisting her greed into some grotesque justification. I clenched my teeth, a silent scream building, swallowing the flood of pure rage that threatened to erupt. My voice was dangerously tight when I managed to ask, "So, Tyler, were you planning to walk all the way home by yourself? He nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. Uh-huh. Mommy told me this morning I'm a big boy now. She said I can walk home alone. The teacher taught us to watch the stoplights and not talk to strangers. I remembered everything. He puffed out his tiny chest, looking up at me with those bright, innocent eyes, clearly expecting praise. And my heart didn't just break, it shattered into dust. This small, precious child, sent out alone, expected to navigate traffic, to beware of strangers, as if it were a game. Amanda hadn't given his safety a second thought. The world blurred. I fought for balance, for control. Rage, heartbreak, a profound sorrow. They roared within me, a destructive tempest. I had once, naively, believed that even if Amanda was vain, even if her desires were shallow, she would possess, at the very least, a mother's instinctive love for her child. Reality, in its cruelest form, slapped me across the face. If she had only stolen my money, perhaps in time, I might have found it in me to forgive her. But endangering Tyler, putting his very life at risk, that crossed a line. That was unforgivable. You can scam me, I thought, a cold fury solidifying within me. You can lie to me, but you do not gamble with a child's safety, ever. 40 years I'd spent teaching. If there was one thing I could not, would not, abide, it was adults who shirked their sacred responsibility to protect children. Right then, holding his small hand, I made my decision. This entire charade, this grotesque play they'd orchestrated, was going to end, and I would be the one to bring the curtain down. I held Tyler's small, cool hand tightly as we walked home, step by deliberate step. The setting sun stretched our shadows long before us. The aroma of dinner drifted from neighboring houses, but the chill inside me was far colder than any late autumn air. When we arrived home, Amanda was sprawled on the living room couch, a thick white mask slathered on her face, lazily scrolling through her phone. She glanced up as Tyler and I walked in, a flicker of surprise, or was it guilt, in her eyes. It vanished instantly. She slipped back into her usual indolent slouch, barely lifting her head. "Oh, Helen, you're late," she drawled, her voice utterly indifferent, the mask failing to conceal the dismissiveness beneath. I didn't respond immediately. I exuded calm. I helped Tyler off with his backpack, poured him a glass of warm milk, and made sure he was settled with a book. Then, and only then, did I walk over to the sofa. I stood before her, my shadow falling over her. My voice, when I spoke, was quiet, steady, perhaps too steady. "Amanda, I picked Tyler up from school today." She froze. Her fingers stopped scrolling. "He said today was no different, that you told him to walk home alone because you had to get your treatments." I paused, letting the silence stretch, charged and heavy, between us. Then, my voice dropped, dangerously low. "Amanda, you took the money I gave you, money meant for my grandson's future, and squandered it on yourself. And far, far worse, you abandoned your own child on a public street. Tell me," I pressed, "does your conscience not ache, even a little?" My words, I knew, were slicing through the carefully constructed façade she wore. Her face contorted, panic morphing into ugly, cornered defiance. She lunged towards me, a spitting, screeching animal. "What I do is none of your damn business. You're just a freeloading old hag. You think you can boss me around?" She jabbed a vicious finger towards my face, spittle flying, her words dripping pure venom. "So what if I spend your money? It's your useless son's fault. If Jason could actually support his family, your charity wouldn't even be needed." I stared at her, this creature, and felt only a profound, bone-weary disgust. All those years of patience, of quiet understanding, of silent, unseen sacrifice, they meant nothing to her, less than nothing. My generosity, twisted into some perverse debt I apparently owed. I drew a slow, deep breath, forcing the scalding fury down into a hard, cold resolve. My voice, when I finally spoke, was iron. "Since you feel that way, Amanda," I said, each word deliberate, "then hear this. Starting next month, there will be no more money, not one single cent." A bitter thought flashed. "You always believed I was easy to fool, didn't you? But at my age, child, I've seen far too much. Your petty games are laughably transparent. My controlled coldness, I could see, hit her harder than any shouting match could have. Amanda stood stunned for a beat, then erupted. She went utterly berserk, charging at me, her voice shattering the air. What? What did you just say? No more money? She flailed her arms, shrieking like a banshee. Helen Brooks, if you won't pay, then get the hell out of this house. We're not carrying dead weight here. Get out! I straightened my spine, feeling a deadly calm settle over me. The accumulated years of humiliation, the mountains of swallowed bitterness, all of it crystallized in that instant into one unshakable resolve. I looked her dead in the eye. Amanda, I said, my voice soft now, but each word a honed blade. Perhaps you've forgotten. The deed to this house still bears my name, and that of my late husband. I took a slow, deliberate step closer, my gaze cutting into her. This is my house. You have no right, none whatsoever, to tell me to leave. It was as if a bucket of ice water had been thrown over her. Amanda, moments before a screeching harpy spitting venom, visibly shrank. Her bravado imploded, collapsing into wide-eyed, slack-jawed panic. It had clearly never, ever crossed her vapid mind that this old, soft-hearted woman she thought she controlled actually held the ultimate power over the very roof above her head. You might have forgotten, I thought with grim satisfaction, but I haven't. Before you start evicting people, my dear, it's always wise to check who actually owns the ground you're standing on. Just then, as if on cue, the front door creaked open. Jason walked in, looking utterly drained from his workday. Amanda's eyes flickered. Instantly, her demeanor shifted. She threw herself into his arms, bursting into theatrical sobs. Jason, oh, Jason, you have to talk to your mother. She's gone completely crazy. She's cutting us off. She wants to throw me out on the street. How are we supposed to live? Jason froze, his gaze darting helplessly between Amanda's tear-streaked, accusatory face and my own grim calm. His brow furrowed so deeply it looked permanently etched. Mom, what's going on? He asked, his voice quiet, pleading, desperate to diffuse the explosive tension. A different kind of coldness, a deep disappointment spread through me. Seeing the weary uncertainty in my son's eyes, I bit the inside of my cheek, hard, forcing down the frustrated scream that clawed at my throat. Then, calmly, clearly, I laid it all out for him. The whole, ugly, unvarnished truth. How Amanda had systematically siphoned the money intended for Tyler's future and lavished it upon herself. How she had, without a second thought, allowed our little boy, his son, to wander the streets alone. I spared no detail. Every fact was laid bare, sharp and unforgiving. If there was a sliver of decency, of fairness, left in Jason's heart, he needed to see this abyss for what it was. When I finished, an unnerving silence descended. Jason just stood there, rubbing his hands together, his face a mask of agony and what looked like utter defeat. He glanced at me, then at Amanda. Amanda's tearful gaze, fixed on him, was now laced with something harder, a thinly veiled threat. Finally, Jason let out a sigh, a sound so broken, so weary, it barely seemed human. Mom, he began, his voice cracking, I know you've done so much for us, I truly do. But, Amanda, she didn't mean any harm. Maybe it was just a mistake. A series of mistakes. Could you possibly just let it go? This one time? He hesitated, then added, his voice dropping to an almost desperate beg. Please, Mom, for Tyler's sake, for the family, so we can all just live in peace. Peace? This was his idea of peace, a fragile, hollow sham bought with my money, my dignity, patching over a foundation of lies and festering betrayal. I stared at Jason's worn, defeated face, and my heart, already fractured, splintered into 1,000 more pieces. Pity warred with rage, pity for his weakness, rage at his willful blindness. Oh, the unique heartache of a parent, I thought, bitterness coiling in my gut. I raised this boy with my own 2 hands, and somewhere along the line, I failed to teach him how to stand up, how to be a man of principle. I I closed my eyes, momentarily shutting out his pleading face, and a wave of profound, soul-deep exhaustion washed over me. The very next morning, before the sting of last night's crushing disappointment had even begun to fade, the doorbell began to ring, furiously, as if someone were trying to hammer it through the frame. I opened the door to Shirley Davis. She barged in like a Category 5 hurricane, dragging her perpetually awkward, perpetually silent husband Leonard in her wake. Shirley didn't bother with pleasantries, nor did she remove her shoes. She stormed directly up to me, hands planted on her hips, jabbing a finger perilously close to my face as she shrieked, "Helen Brooks, you meddling old hag!" Meanwhile, my hand, quite discreetly, slid into my apron pocket. With a light, practiced press of a button, I started recording the entire auditory spectacle on my phone. Perfect, I thought, a chill satisfaction spreading through me. If they're going to deliver this circus directly to my doorstep, I might as well preserve every last disgraceful syllable for posterity. "Oh, divorce," I repeated slowly, my voice deliberately flat, devoid of emotion. "And take Tyler?" "Shirley, dear," I said, my tone deceptively mild, "you really shouldn't make threats like that. Kidnapping a child, you know, is quite a serious crime." Shirley actually stumbled for a split second, visibly thrown off by my unruffled composure. But she recovered with astonishing speed, her shriek escalating in volume. "Crime? Crime? Please. We'll make it look perfectly legal. We'll say you abused my daughter, abused your own grandson. We'll destroy your reputation. We'll ruin you in this town." I almost laughed out loud. Abuse? Such convenient, damning accusations, so cheaply, so recklessly thrown about. "You think I'm so easily frightened?" I mused with a grim, internal smile. "Your childish little games are, frankly, beneath contempt." Outwardly, I said nothing. I simply let the tiny microphone in my pocket diligently record every threat, every vile accusation, every nuance of their venom. Shirley, clearly incandescent that her tirade wasn't reducing me to a weeping puddle, actually stomped her foot and practically spat. "You've got 3 days, Helen Brooks. 3 days. You hand over the money, and you agree to keep it coming. Otherwise, don't you dare blame us for what happens next." She shot me one final, venomous glare, grabbed the hapless Leonard by the arm, and, with Amanda smirking triumphantly at her side, stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The moment the door slammed shut, the house plunged into a silence so profound I could hear the faint, elderly hum of the refrigerator. Jason, I noticed, stood frozen nearby, pale as a ghost. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, as if words were fighting a losing battle to escape. But in the end, nothing came. He just dropped his head and, with a defeated slump of his shoulders, slunk away to his room without uttering a single word. I was left standing alone in the suddenly vast, empty living room, and so began Amanda's campaign of petty, juvenile revenge. The shared spaces, the living room, the kitchen, the hallway, went uncleaned. Trash bags began to pile up by the back door, the sour stench of refuse soon clinging to the air. If I cooked a meal for myself, she would saunter by, perhaps on her way to the fridge for a soda, and with a smirk, deliberately knock my plate, or a portion of food, straight into the garbage can. "Wow," she'd sneer, "still got money for groceries, old woman. Thought you'd be broke by now." I refused to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. I didn't beg, I didn't plead, I certainly didn't break down. I quietly washed my single plate, my single fork. I did my meager grocery shopping alone. I cooked my simple meals in my room on a small hot plate I'd unearthed. When the shared spaces became truly squalid, I simply retreated to my bedroom and the small adjoining bathroom, keeping only my personal space clean and habitable. In the quiet of the night, I began to pack. Carefully, methodically, folding clothes I hadn't worn in years, boxing up cherished books, photos, the few mementos of a life I was preparing to reclaim. Preparing for the day I would leave this house, my house, but on my own terms. My pension wasn't vast, but it would be enough. Enough for a small, clean apartment, perhaps a modest unit in a quiet retirement community. Enough for me to live simply, but with dignity, freely. It's only now, I mused one evening, watching dust motes dance in the sliver of moonlight from my window, at this late stage of life, that I truly understand. Between money and family, only one proves consistently reliable, and it isn't always the one you expect. I was old, yes, but I would rather live humbly, with my head held high, than continue to prostrate myself for the illusion of family harmony. This war they had started. Oh, I would see it through to its bitter, inevitable end. When Amanda realized her campaign of domestic squalor wasn't breaking my resolve, she escalated. Her tactics turned outward, becoming more insidious. She began spreading vicious rumors throughout the neighborhood. I was mentally unstable. I was abusing my beloved grandson, Tyler. I was a miser, hoarding money while starving her and Jason, the poor, suffering, virtuous daughter-in-law. And to my profound pain, it began to work. Neighbors who once greeted me with warm smiles now offered strained, awkward nods, or worse, abruptly crossed the street to avoid me. Whispers seemed to follow me like shadows down the once friendly, leafy paths of our community. I could feel the prickle of judgment in every averted gaze, every hushed conversation that ceased as I approached. That isolation, that quiet, creeping social ostracism. In many ways, it cut deeper than any insult screamed directly to my face. I had lived my entire life striving for integrity, for respectability. My reputation, built over decades of honest work and quiet dignity, had always mattered. And now, almost overnight, thanks to Amanda's poison, I had become that woman, the crazy, abusive, hoarding old crone everyone pitied or reviled. Was I hurt? Deeply. Was I angry? To my very core. But I knew, with a weary certainty, that it was useless to waste my breath on explanations or tears with those who had already eagerly embraced the salacious narrative. I clenched my teeth, literally and figuratively, and forced myself to maintain an outward calm I rarely felt. They thought they could wear me down with whispers, surround me, isolate me, and force my surrender. They underestimated me. They were profoundly wrong. I would not give them that satisfaction. Instead, I sought out Susan Carter, a former teaching colleague and one of the few people I trusted implicitly. Susan was sharp, discreet, well-connected within the community, and possessed an unerring moral compass. I confided in her, selectively at first, outlining the general troubles at home, but focusing on Amanda's increasingly frequent and mysterious afternoon errands. I asked if she could, very quietly, keep an ear to the ground, perhaps an eye out. When I finished, there was a brief pause. Then Liz Lewis spoke, her voice decisive. "Helen, based on what you've just described, the systematic economic exploitation, the clear child endangerment, and now this compelling evidence of infidelity, you have significant grounds to fight back, and fight back hard. With the proof you're gathering, we can pursue not only a favorable divorce settlement for Jason, but also ensure property rights are correctly assigned, and, most importantly, fight for primary custody of Tyler." My throat felt raw, scraped, but my voice when I replied was surprisingly steady. "Good. I want them to pay for every single thing they've done." "Then keep collecting evidence," Liz instructed, her tone all business. "Document everything, especially anything further related to Tyler's safety, or lack thereof. School records, doctor's visits he misses because of her negligence, anything. That will be crucial for custody." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I understand." From that day forward, on the surface, life in our tense household appeared to continue its dysfunctional course. I cooked my solitary meals. I picked Tyler up from school without fail. I even managed a wan smile when necessary. But behind this placid façade, I was an avenging angel, meticulously building my case, brick by damning brick. I formally requested Tyler's school attendance and pickup records, documenting every instance of tardiness or absence on Amanda's part when she was supposedly responsible. I printed out my bank statements, highlighting every single $4,000 transfer to Jason's account, ostensibly for Tyler's education. Susan, my loyal ally, continued her discreet inquiries, unearthing more details about Amanda's gym visits, her spending patterns, the whispers about her trainer friend. Every document, every photograph, every scrap of information, every covert recording of Shirley's threats, or Amanda's callousness, each was another heavy stone in the impenetrable wall of evidence I was constructing around them, a wall they would not be able to tear down. I wasn't rushing, I wasn't shouting. My anger was a cold, controlled burn now. I was patient, I was thorough, because this time, when I finally made my move, I would ensure that Amanda and her equally odious mother Shirley, along with their entire edifice of lies, came crashing down with undeniable, irrefutable force. On the surface, to them, I remained the gentle, increasingly silent, perhaps slightly senile old woman. Amanda would lounge in the living room, my living room, a lollipop often dangling from her lips, lazily scrolling through online shopping apps on her phone, or chatting loudly and indiscreetly with her equally vacuous friends. "Oh my God, Brittany, that coat is gorgeous," she'd bray. "I have to get it. Anyway, who cares? The old hag's cash cow has finally dried up, so Jason just better start working a hell of a lot harder, right?" Her shrill, sneering laugh would slice through the air like a rusty knife. I'd walk past, perhaps carrying a steaming mug of tea to my room, my expression deliberately bland, as if I hadn't heard a single wretched word. But in my pocket, my fingers would often, quite reflexively now, press the record button on my small device. Liz, my lawyer, had been clear over the phone. Abuse isn't just physical, Helen. Emotional neglect, coercive control, financial exploitation, these can be just as damaging and just as potent in court, especially when children are involved. I missed nothing, not a single detail, not this time. This time, my case would be flawless, airtight. That evening, Jason came home from work, looking even more exhausted than usual. He shrugged off his jacket, his eyes, heavy-lidded and shadowed, catching sight of me as I was, for a rare moment, in the kitchen tidying up a small area. His gaze, conflicted and deeply troubled, lingered on me for a long moment. "Mom," he said finally, his voice hesitant, laced with an unmistakable trace of guilt, speaking from the doorway. "Amanda, she's been under a lot of stress lately. With everything. Try not to take it all to heart, okay?" I turned from the sink, dried my hands, and offered him a small, gentle smile, the kind that reveals nothing. "I'm perfectly fine, Jason. You go on and get some rest. Don't you worry about me." He seemed visibly relieved, offering a quick, grateful nod before retreating down the hallway to the bedroom he still, nominally, shared with his wife. I watched his slumped shoulders disappear, and my heart twisted with a cold, bitter sadness. My son, this boy I had raised, loved, sacrificed for. He knew, on some level, he had to know, that something was profoundly, deeply wrong. Yet still, instinctively, pathetically, he chose to shield, to make excuses for, the very person who was systematically destroying him, betraying him, and endangering their child. But it no longer mattered. Soon, very soon, he wouldn't be able to shield her anymore. The truth, in all its ugliness, would be undeniable. That weekend, I made my first strategic move. I approached Amanda as she was preening in front of the hall mirror. "Amanda," I said, my tone deliberately casual, "Tyler's birthday is next Saturday. I was thinking we could have a little family get-together here. You know, invite your parents too, make it a bit festive for him." Amanda barely glanced at me, raising a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her tone dripping with cultivated indifference. "Sure. Whatever," she drawled, examining her lipstick. "It's not like I have anything better to do than plan a kiddie party." Her dismissiveness was, as usual, palpable. I tucked her ungracious reaction away, noting it with the precision of a seasoned strategist. If everything proceeded according to my rapidly forming plan, this little family gathering would be the perfect, indeed the only, stage for the reckoning I intended to unleash. I also made sure to extend carefully worded invitations to Susan and Liz, my attorney. "Just a small birthday lunch for Tyler," I'd said. Perhaps you could come, Susan, and take a few photos. And Liz, you're so good with children. Tyler adores you. They both agreed, Susan with knowing warmth, Liz with a brisk professional curiosity. Everything was quietly, inexorably falling into place. Amanda, Shirley, even Jason in his own way. They all operated under the delusion that they held the cards, that I was a spent force. They hadn't realized. The true hunter rarely fires the first, loudest shot. She waits, she watches, she prepares. The day of Tyler's 7th birthday dawned bright and deceptively crystal clear. I woke before sunrise, tied on my old familiar apron, and began preparing a simple but, I hoped, festive lunch. We exchanged a brief, almost imperceptible, knowing glance. No words were necessary between us. Soon after, Liz, my attorney, arrived. She carried a brightly wrapped, child-sized gift and was dressed in unassuming casual clothes. Plain jeans and a soft sweater. She slipped into the small gathering, like any other invited family friend, complimenting the food, wishing Tyler a happy birthday, and then settling quietly with a magazine in a corner of the living room, observing. Everything was ready. I consciously suppressed the nervous tremor that threatened to betray the turmoil beneath my skin, keeping my hands busy in the kitchen, feigning an outward calm, while, inside, an invisible wire stretched tighter and tighter and tighter. "What's the matter? Feeling generous with what's left of your money for a change?" Amanda snickered from beside her mother, her face a mask of smug, entitled satisfaction. I offered them both what I hoped was a serene, grandmotherly smile, pretending not to register the venom dripping from Shirley's words, or the contempt from Amanda. I carefully arranged slices of fruit on a platter. "Today is Tyler's special day," I said, my voice deliberately warm and inclusive. "Let's all try to enjoy ourselves and keep the mood festive for him." Shirley merely rolled her eyes with theatrical impatience and plopped herself heavily onto my sofa with an exaggerated huff, already looking bored. Amanda, after a disdainful glance around, sauntered over to where Jason stood awkwardly by the window and curled herself against him, her voice instantly transforming into a syrupy, manipulative sweetness. "Honey," she cooed, loud enough for me to hear, stroking his arm. "Mommy was just saying, a birthday gift for a boy Tyler's age really has to be extravagant these days, you know. Otherwise, he just won't be happy, and we don't want that, do we? There's this amazing new kid-sized electric sports car I saw. Super expensive, of course, but..." She paused, then looked pointedly towards me. "Grandma Helen won't be stingy about it for her only grandson, now will she?" Jason's face visibly stiffened. I saw a muscle twitch in his jaw, a storm brewing behind his tired, haunted eyes. He opened his mouth, as if to finally protest this blatant manipulation, but then, with a sigh that seemed to deflate him, he just nodded, silently, powerlessly. From across the room, I watched them, my expression unreadable, my heart a cold, hard stone. The way Amanda clung to him, so possessive, so false. The way Jason, my son, bowed his head in acquiescence yet again. And in that moment I felt almost nothing. The pain had burned itself out, leaving only a grim determination. Years of my sacrifice, years of giving everything I had for this family, met not with a shred of gratitude, but with these endless, shameless, grasping demands. But today, yes, today, they would finally learn what it meant to face genuine, unavoidable consequences. At the small dining table, Susan, ever the professional, fiddled casually with her camera, aiming it generally towards the group, and I saw her discreetly switch it from still photo to video recording mode. Liz, in her corner, appeared engrossed in her novel, but I knew her sharp ears were missing nothing. On the surface, as I brought out the food, the atmosphere was one of forced, brittle cheerfulness, laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes, compliments that sounded hollow. Underneath, the tension crackled, thick and palpable, like static electricity before a violent storm. Just then, Tyler, oblivious and joyous, came bounding over to me, throwing his little arms tightly around my waist. His upturned face beamed with pure, unadulterated birthday joy. "Grandma, Grandma!" I get to make 3 wishes today, he exclaimed. I bent down, hugged him tightly, and kissed his soft forehead. That's right, sweetheart, I whispered warmly, my heart aching with love for this innocent child caught in the crossfire. You make 3 big wishes, and just make sure you wish for things that are truly, truly important. As for me, I had only one wish left now, to finally, irrevocably, end all the lies, and to reclaim the life, the peace, and the dignity that was rightfully mine. The table was set, the small turkey carved. Everyone gathered around the table. Plates clattered, forced conversation buzzed. Shirley, already shoveling turkey and stuffing into her mouth with gusto, flashed me a wide, fake, sugary grin. Well, Helen, dear, she said, her mouth full, attempting a theatrical chuckle. Looks like our 2 families are well and truly tied together now, eh? For better or for worse. We should all try to get along nicely, don't you think? Amanda, seated beside Jason, pressed her lips into a tight, superior smirk, the contempt flickering in her eyes, only barely concealed as she picked delicately at her food. Jason, as usual, kept his head down, saying little, listlessly pushing food around his plate with his fork. I waited for a lull in Shirley's monologue about her new hairdresser. Then I lifted my water glass. I smiled, a pleasant, almost beatific smile. Of course, Shirley, I said, my voice surprisingly syrupy smooth. Family should stick together. We should always endeavor to show a little kindness, a little understanding, when and where we can. I paused, deliberately, letting the words hang in the suddenly quiet air, my gaze sweeping slowly, meaningfully, across each adult face at the table. But sometimes, I continued, my voice subtly cooling, losing its earlier warmth, taking on a sharper edge, family also needs a little truth, a little accountability, perhaps even a little discipline. Shirley blinked, momentarily thrown off her gluttonous rhythm. Amanda's smirk faltered, a flicker of unease in her eyes. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his gaze fixed firmly on his plate. The air in the room grew thick, heavy with unspoken animosities and impending revelations. And in that pregnant, suspended moment, my fingers, in my apron pocket, quietly, decisively, pressed record again on my small audio device. Across the table, I saw Susan's camera lens subtly adjust, focusing, capturing. Well, enough of that serious talk, Shirley suddenly chirped, clapping her hands together with a brittle, forced enthusiasm. Let's sing happy birthday for our little Tyler, shall we? Her grin was wide and painfully artificial. Amanda, seizing the diversion, joined in with gusto, tugging on Tyler's hand, attempting to make him sway back and forth, her face plastered with an exaggerated, cloying, motherly smile. Jason, looking rigid and profoundly awkward, forced a pained smile onto his lips, his eyes, however, darting nervously towards me, then quickly away. I stood slightly apart, holding my water glass, observing this cheap, transparent pantomime unfold under the warm glow of the dining room light and the flickering candles on Tyler's small cake. A perfect family portrait for any unsuspecting outsider. But today I knew the masks were all about to be ripped away. After the song, Tyler, beaming, squeezed his eyes tightly shut and made his 3 wishes. Then, his face alight with excitement, he allowed me to help him cut the first slice of cake, which I placed carefully onto his plate and into his waiting hands. I set down the cake knife. Then, very deliberately, I reached down beside my chair and picked up a plain, unassuming cardboard document box that had been sitting there, unnoticed by them, throughout the meal. Jason, Amanda, Shirley, I said, my voice surprisingly light, almost affectionate, as if I were about to share a pleasant family anecdote. Today, besides celebrating dear Tyler's birthday, I thought I'd also bring out a little something extra, a special contribution, shall we say, to the family archives. Amanda blinked, her smirk returning. Oh, another surprise from Grandma, she drawled with mock sweetness. Shirley rolled her eyes extravagantly. For God's sake, Helen, don't start one of your rambling old lady lectures. If you've got something to say, just spit it out and get it over with. Jason, however, lifted his head slowly, his eyes widening slightly, a faint, unmistakable flicker of dread dawning on his weary features. I offered them all another serene smile, then slowly, methodically, opened the box and began to pull out several neatly stacked piles of printed documents and photographs. "These," I began, my voice still gentle, placing the first slim stack on the table, "are copies of my bank transfer records for the past 5 years." My voice remained even, almost soothing, like a teacher patiently explaining a simple lesson. Every single month, without fail, $4,000, transferred directly into the joint account, an account primarily accessed by you, Amanda, supposedly, as we all agreed, for Tyler's education and associated expenses. Amanda's smirk visibly stiffened, but she recovered with remarkable speed, letting out a short, derisive laugh. "Honestly, Mom, you know raising kids in the Bay Area isn't cheap. That money barely covered essentials." "Yeah, Helen," Shirley chimed in immediately, her voice dripping with its customary scorn. "What you generously gave probably barely scratched the surface of what it costs to give a child a decent upbringing these days." I nodded, my smile unwavering. "You're absolutely right, Shirley. It is expensive," I agreed smoothly, "which is why I was so concerned. So I did a little further checking, just to see, where exactly all that essential money for Tyler was going." And with that, I laid out the second thicker stack of documents. Credit card statements, Amanda's personal credit card statements to be precise, itemized, showing her extensive gym membership fees, her very regular, very expensive personal trainer sessions, her purchases from certain high-end boutiques, her spa days. I spread them across the table like a poker player laying down a royal flush. The room didn't just freeze. The very air seemed to solidify. Amanda's face, which had been a mask of arrogant nonchalance, drained of all color. Then, in the very next instant, flushed a startling, blotchy, guilty red. Shirley, for once, was speechless. She stared dumbly at the papers, her mouth agape, fork halfway to her lips, clearly unable to process what she was seeing. I continued, my voice now soft, but as sharp and cutting as a silk thread pulled taut. "An elite private gym, Amanda. Multiple one-on-one training sessions per week. Luxury weekend wellness retreats. Are these perhaps the new educational expenses for a 7-year-old boy that I wasn't aware of?" Amanda shot to her feet so abruptly she knocked her chair over with a crash. She lunged towards the table, snatching at the papers. You're making this up. This is private. Jason gave me money." Jason knew I was spending that money. Jason's head, which had been buried in his hands, jerked up. His face was a canvas of dawning shock and utter disbelief. "No, Amanda," he whispered. "I didn't." I ignored their interplay and calmly, deliberately, pulled out the final, most damning items from my box, the photographs. One after another, I laid them down on the table, face up, clear and undeniable. Amanda and her young muscular trainer, cozy at the gym, laughing, heads close together, in intimate-looking cafes. And then, the clincher, the two of them, side by side, disappearing together into the lobby of that sleek, modern, very expensive-looking apartment building. Susan, ever the professional, standing discreetly to one side, almost invisibly, subtly zoomed her camera lens in, catching every minute twitch of horrified panic that danced across Amanda's rapidly crumbling façade. "Or perhaps," I said, my voice now tinged with ice, as I reached into my apron pocket, "you'd all like to hear a little something else, a little auditory evidence, perhaps." And I pressed play on my small digital recorder. Amanda's voice, sickly sweet and distorted by the recording, but unmistakably hers, spilled into the stunned silence of the room. "Oh, don't you worry your pretty little head about it, baby. That old hag is absolutely clueless. She genuinely thinks I'm at home playing Mother of the Year, or running errands for Tyler." Then, a different recording, Shirley's coarse, unmistakable cackle. "Milk her for all she's worth, honey. Better we spend it now than let some stranger or some damned charity get their hands on it when she finally croaks." Each recorded word, each casual, cruel betrayal, sliced through the room. deeper and more damaging than the last. Jason's face had turned a ghastly, chalky white. His hands were clenched on the tablecloth, his knuckles so white they seemed translucent. He was staring at Amanda, his wife, not with anger, not yet, but with a look of such profound, devastating shock, as if seeing a complete and terrifying stranger for the very first time. Amanda finally, utterly panicked. She shrieked, a raw animal sound, and grabbed at Jason's arm. Jason, she's lying. She's faked all of this. She's trying to set me up. You can't believe her. She photoshopped those pictures. She edited those recordings. Jason, please. Enough, Amanda. Jason's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. He shoved her arm away, not violently, but with a finality that made her stumble backward. Shock, then pure, unadulterated rage, flashed across her pale, desperate face. And Shirley. Finally, Shirley, the woman who had always blustered and bullied her way through life with such shrill, unshakable arrogance, seemed to visibly deflate, a glimmer of dawning, horrified realization in her beady eyes. The tide hadn't just turned, a tsunami had hit, but old habits die hard. Shirley rallied. She slammed her meaty palm down on the dining table with a sharp, cracking sound, rattling the remaining dishes. "Helen Brooks!" she shrieked, her face contorted with fury. "You vile, manipulative old woman! How dare you do this? How dare you try to set up my innocent daughter like this? How dare you try to poison their marriage?" I slowly lifted my head, meeting her furious, sputtering gaze with one of my own that I hoped was calm, cool, and as fathomless as the still surface of a very deep, very cold lake. "Shirley," I said, my voice quiet now, but, I trusted, utterly lethal. "Every photograph you see here is genuine. Every word on those recordings was spoken. Every receipt is authentic. There is no setup. There is only truth. If this family, if their marriage, has been torn apart, Shirley, it has been torn apart by your daughter's actions and your own complicity, not by mine." Shirley's face burned a furious, mottled crimson. She jabbed a trembling, accusatory finger towards me, spittle flying. "You'll die alone, you miserable old hag. You mark my words. Once Amanda leaves him, Jason will never forgive you for this. You'll regret this day for the rest of your pathetic, lonely life." Amanda, not to be outdone by her mother's histrionics, chimed in, her voice now shrill and cracking with a potent combination of fear and fury. "Exactly. She's always hated me. Always. She's always wanted to come between us, Jason. She's jealous." Their combined shrieking and accusations filled the small dining room, an ugly, discordant cacophony, like the desperate howling of cornered, rabid animals. And yet, inside me, despite the storm raging around us, there was a core of absolute, icy clarity. I turned away from them, then, and looked directly at my son. Jason's face was a ravaged battlefield of shock, exhaustion, dawning comprehension, and profound, unspeakable grief. When I spoke to him, my voice was softer, imbued not with anger, but with a quiet, unshakable sorrow and an equally unshakable resolve. "Jason," I said, my gaze holding his, "from this day forward, I will no longer fund this lifestyle. I will no longer enable this deceit. I will no longer sacrifice my peace, my financial security, or my dignity for the illusion of family harmony that never truly existed. My pension is mine. This house is mine. What remains of my future, it belongs to me." Jason's lips parted. He looked as if he wanted to speak, to argue, to plead, perhaps. He looked from Amanda, her face now a mask of disbelief and spitting fury, back to me, to the steady, unyielding, and perhaps even compassionate calm he must have seen in my eyes. Finally, he closed his own eyes, for a long, painful moment. When he opened them again, the agony was still there, but it was overlaid with a profound weariness and a new, grim, undeniable resolve I had never witnessed in him before. After what felt like an eternity, he drew a deep, shaky breath. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, raspy. "Mom, I understand." Then he turned slowly, deliberately, to face his wife. And in his gaze, for the first time, I saw no lingering trace of affection, no weakness, no doubt, only a cold, hard, irrevocable disappointment. "Amanda," he said, his voice flat, devoid of its earlier hesitation. "I want a divorce." The words, quiet as they were, struck the stunned room like a hammer blow. Amanda physically jerked, as if struck, her face contorted in an instant from fury to sheer, uncomprehending horror. "No," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "No, Jason, you can't. You wouldn't. If you divorce me, I swear to God you will never see Tyler again." Jason's eyes fluttered closed, just for a second, a spasm of pain crossing his face at her threat. But when he opened them, his voice was still steady, albeit laced with sorrow. "Then I'll fight you for custody, Amanda. I'll fight you through the courts, and I will win." He looked her up and down then, a slow, deliberate appraisal filled with an icy finality that chilled even me. "And as for everything else, you need to get ready to face the consequences of your actions." Amanda didn't just lunge. She flew at him, a maelstrom of sobs, screams, and desperate, clawing hands. Shirley, simultaneously, erupted into her own renewed tantrum from the sidelines, screeching obscenities and threats. The room, moments before a stage for quiet revelations, devolved into utter, ugly chaos. And I simply stood there, still and silent amidst the storm, a spectator at the messy, inevitable end of a tragedy that had, in truth, been playing out in slow motion for a very long time. Susan, my dear, unflappable Susan, continued to quietly capture it all, her camera lens an unblinking, relentless eye. Liz, my astute attorney, notebook now open on her lap, calmly, almost serenely, jotted down observations, her pen flying across the page, meticulously documenting every threat, every admission, every unraveling strand of their deceit. After a moment, I moved to the table. I carefully, methodically, gathered the scattered documents, my evidence, into a neat, orderly stack. My voice, when I spoke again, was low, steady, and carried over the din. "This," I said, holding up the thick pile of their undoing, "this is merely the harvest of the seeds you yourselves have sown." Then I turned to Tyler, who was cowering by the doorway, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. I scooped him up into my arms, holding him tight, protectively, against my chest. "Shh, don't be afraid, little one," I whispered, stroking his hair, pressing his face into my shoulder. "It's all right. Grandma's here. Grandma's got you."